As viewers of the show know, one of the things that we have talked about and covered most often since October 7th, and it's a topic about which I feel quite passionately, is the way in which so many pro-Israel conservatives on the American right, many of whom I've been aligned with on a lot of different issues, primarily the issue of free speech and opposing censorship and opposing the dividing up of everybody into little minority groups and insisting on special rights for them based on their demographic characteristics, or insisting that everybody in a certain minority group are victims who need special protection, including censorship protection. So many of them have completely reversed all of their claimed beliefs because this time the censorship is in their interest. It's for a cause that they support. The speech that's being censored is speech that they hate. And I've spoken about this often and on other shows, on this show, so I don't want to give you my views on that again, but I do want to show you a remarkably interesting and I think highly illuminating conversation that took place when Howie Mandel, who's a Jewish comedian, had on his podcast another Jewish comedian, Ari Shaffir. And Ari Shaffir comes from this kind of the world of Joe Rogan. I think he became very well known for how many times he went on Joe Rogan's show. And although Joe Rogan's show and that kind of sphere of comedians that grew up around him aren't really politicized in the classic sense. That's one of the reasons why Joe Rogan is popular among so many people. They do have certain views in common or certain values in common, one of which for certain is a lot of hostility toward woke ideology, to the idea that people should be canceled or censored because of things that they say. That is probably the connective tissue between all of these people. And they particularly hate efforts to self-victimize, to insist that your group is somehow so marginalized and unfairly treated that you can't succeed or that you're endangered. And I've watched a lot of people who have been saying those things for years, if not decades, who are American Jews, who are conservative or who are at least anti-woke, suddenly start sounding like every leftist at Oberlin's campuses with purple hair that they've been mocking for the last decade. Suddenly they're in the one group that's endangered in the United States, that needs protection. And this is all the things that Howie Mandel shared, I think, without even any plan of doing so with Ari Shaffir, just assuming that Ari Shaffir would agree with him. Because this is something that Howie Mandel is hearing from everywhere. Something he just assumes is true. He believes there's no other side to this. And yet Ari Shaffir didn't, in a way that was really interesting because of how organic it was. It was not a political conversation overtly, but Ari Shaffir was obviously responding and reacting to the things Howie Mandel was saying. And I want to play it for you because I thought it was an incredibly effective way of debunking what has become, in some ways, the dominant strain in American politics. How many congressional hearings have we had over the last 8 months on this topic? How many times have members of Congress gone to Israel and proclaim their commitment to battling anti-Semitism in the United States? It's become, I mean, there have been laws passed and presidents of campuses fired and speech codes implemented and censorship laws enacted, all in the name of this cause. So because there's so many people saying it from every side and so few people contesting it, because if you contest it, you'll immediately be accused of being an anti-Semite, a lot of people just assume it's true because they've never even realized that there's another way of looking at it. That's how views often get formed in the United States. And that was clearly the case for Howie Mandel, and you'll see how surprised he was that someone he obviously likes and thinks he's like-minded with doesn't see it that way at all. Let me show you part of this.
Speaking of culture, you know, like we were just saying, there were 3 Jews sitting here. Have you felt the...
So by 3 Jews, he's referring to himself, Howie Mandel, his daughter, who's a co-host of his podcast, and then Ari Shaffir. So he's saying, speaking of groups or whatever, there are 3 Jews here.
We were just saying, there were 3 Jews sitting here. Have you felt the, are you feeling
what? The fucking, we're back. And
the love?
Dude, we're back. Center of attention again. I love it.
Really?
Oh, yeah. We were a joke before. Now we're taken seriously. Who else wants some? Who else wants some?
You seeing the positive in this?
Yeah, dude, we're fucking...
He likes attention.
Yeah, we're back. Before we were just some, like, joke, like, I remember the tribe, like little light things. Now people take us seriously.
Seriously?
Go ahead, keep pushing the students. See when we push back.
It's horrible.
It's not horrible. It doesn't happen. It's statistically irrelevant. It should be on the news too much. None of it's really happening.
Are you
I've
fucking
been all
kidding
over
me?
the country. I've seen no actual anti-Semitism. Have you? You look Jewish.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
walked around, people yelled Jew at you or something.
I don't go out.
Yeah, good point.
I don't
I
go
did.
out.
I yelled Jew at him this morning.
Yeah.
No.
I did.
I think it's real.
No one
I
I
think we
know
got to
is-
take it seriously. I think what you're saying is wrong.
No, it's being on the news. Are you familiar with the what's that app that tells you all the robberies in your neighborhood?
Citizen.
Citizen app.
Yeah.
So before this app, everybody was having a great time in their neighborhood. And then suddenly all these housewives are like, there's a robbery every 20 minutes. I can't believe everything's going to shit. They're just aware of it suddenly, the small percentages. It's a little bit in colleges you don't go to. It's not there. It's statistically irrelevant. I go all over the country. I've never...
Now, imagine that here you have Howie Mandel, and again, he was a very famous comedian in the 80s and 90s. I don't know how. I think he's still pretty well known. He's been on a judge on one of those reality shows on a major network, so I think he's probably well known. But he just got done saying, after saying, "Oh, wow, Jews are really being mistreated in the United States. We are being assaulted. We're being attacked." And then when he was asked, like, "What? Has that happened to you even once?" He says, "Oh, I don't go out." So how does he know? And the explanation that Ari Shaffir is giving, I think, is a very important point, not just for this topic, but generally, which is social media has the ability to distort so many issues. You can take extremely aberrational incidents and just post one of these aberrational incidents every day or every week, and then people who follow you and think that you're reporting accurately will think they're seeing the truth. I have a countless number of Jews in my life. My entire family is Jewish. Most of my friends with whom I grew up in the United States when I was a kid are Jewish. I don't know of a single Jewish person in the United States that has ever been the victim of an anti-Semitic act or expression of hatred toward Jews, let alone having some kind of epidemic of it since October 7th. I just spent more than a week in the United States, and then the prior week in Canada. It never even occurred to me that I was somehow endangered because someone might think I'm a Jew or might recognize me and know I'm a Jew and then assault me. This is not anything that's happening, as Ari Shaffir is saying. This does not exist. And yet, American Jews have been told for 8 months now that they cannot send their children to school. They cannot send their kids to colleges, that on Ivy League campuses they're being violently assaulted. And I know on social media, I kept hearing all the time, "Oh, there's hordes of people going around chanting, 'Kill the Jews, kill all Jews.'" And I would ask, like, where did that ever happen on American college campuses? Or people would claim, "Oh, there's so many Jewish students being assaulted physically or threatened with violence on American college campuses." I would say, what are their names? Show me the links to these reports. It hasn't happened. I'm not saying it never happened once, where some argument at Israel or the Gaza or whatever escalated into some physical confrontation. But the only example anyone could ever point to was one that was promoted by Barry Weiss's Free Press and by other conservative journalists about a Jewish woman. And they acted like she was just some random Jewish woman when in fact she's a longtime pro-Israel activist in the United States. And they claimed that she was stabbed in the eye with a Palestinian flag. And Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, went to the Holocaust memorial ceremony where Joe Biden was, and he stood up and said, "We can't tolerate this anti-Semitism. We now have Jewish students, plural, being stabbed in the eye with a Palestinian flag." Now, obviously, if you say that, the image that you're deliberately invoking is one where some Muslim or Arab student has taken their Palestinian flag and stabbed the eye out of a Jewish student. And this is like a pandemic, according to Mike Johnson. This is like happening multiple times. That went all over the media. It turned out to be a complete hoax. We reported on this. We deconstructed it. We showed you the video. She was standing there. She was watching these pro-Palestinian protesters walk by. She was yelling things at them. And one of the people who walked by was waving a flag, like you do with flags, just back and forth. And he brushed by her, and she claims it hit her in the face. She went on television. There was absolutely nothing. The next day, there was nothing wrong with her eye. I mean, if you get stabbed in the eye with a flag, with the sharp end of the flag, you're going to have eye damage if that actually happens. She went on TV the next day and they were like, well, your eyes seem pretty good. And she was like, yeah, the only real symptom I had is a light headache. I was fortunate. And it's like, you were fortunate, you mean it didn't happen. And that's the only example I've heard. So you have this complete moral panic, this complete fabricated victimhood narrative that isn't real. And the people pushing it are the same conservatives who insist that any victimhood narrative from literally every other minority group in the United States, from black people, from Latinos, from immigrants, from Muslims, from trans people, from gay people, any other minority group claims victimhood status, points to attacks that they've endured. People on the right instantly mock it, insist it's not real. They point to the Jussie Smollett hate crime hoax. This is 8 months of a Jussie Smollett hate crime hoax, but not happening just in an isolated incident, but writ large in terms of the entire country. And laws are being passed based on this hoax. And investigations are being launched. And hate speech limits and codes are being implemented on college campuses, and laws being enacted based on this victimhood narrative that the right mocked in every other case except this one, where they finally are either members of that group, so want to claim victimhood status for themselves, or it's a group of people with whom they just feel some sort of empathy because their religion tells them Israel is special and blessed and chosen. And it's amazing to watch. Let me show you a little bit more of this, just because this is not a person who's a political pundit. He doesn't go around reading and speaking about politics often. He's just listening to this and he's saying, what are you talking about? This isn't happening. Where is this happening? And there's no answer provided.
Seen any anti-Semitism?
Are you on a college campus?
No, I'm not.
Go over to USC today.
Ugh, I'm not on a college campus. Nobody I know is.
Students are.
No.
They're just dumb.
No, you're wrong. Oh, you're really wrong. You're really wrong.
Bro, if you shut the laptop, you'll never see it. You'll never know it exists.
Oh, I believe that you can hide from it. I believe that you can be
out in the world, never seeing a single thing. It's just a Citizen app. It's just another Citizen app thing. They're just pushing this thing, and all the Arabs feel attacked, and all the blacks feel attacked, and all the Asians feel attacked.
So there's no anti-Semitism. There's no racism.
It's statistically irrelevant. It's like getting a set over a set. It doesn't. It's not something that's even. It's less than 0.1%.
We're less than 1.1% of the population. Jews.
I thought we're 2.
No. We are. We are 2%.
Yeah.
But I think that
it's not.
We're hated.
Sure, by some, I guess, deep in the where they don't see us.
Do you still have friends in Israel? That's a no. If you have to think that long,
Maybe.
Yeah, my rabbi still lives there.
Do you talk to him?
I haven't in a bit, no. But you know.
Why is that relevant? You have friends in Israel. The claim is about what's happening in the United States. Now, I should correct something I said earlier. I was in the United States for 8 or 9 days, and I said I was not assaulted or accosted for being a Jew. Actually, that's not true. There was an incident I had, which is where I debated Alan Dershowitz on the question of whether we should attack Iran and whether we should be fighting Israel's wars. And I was obviously critical of the idea that we should attack Iran, critical of the idea that we should go to war for Israel, that Israel is guilt-free. And as I was leaving the auditorium, I was surrounded by this extremely hostile, yelling mob of pro-Israel Upper West Side Jews and other Israel supporters who were quite menacing in their behavior. As I think I said before, I lived in New York for 15 years, so I understand how New Yorkers can get agitated. It's just kind of their way. But if you didn't know that, any person would have felt menaced. I mean, they were physically surrounding me. I mean, really screaming at me, not trying to engage in any dialogue, just like insulting me in very personal ways. You know, how can you be a Jew? You're a disgrace to Judaism. You know, that sort of thing. So, but not only have I never experienced any of this in my entire life, let alone since October 7th, and you know, I don't live in the U.S., though I've been there quite often since October 7th. Again, I don't know a single person. Do any of you know a single person, a single Jewish person, who is the victim of some sort of hate crime or physical attack or like very vicious violent assault since October 7th? I'm not saying it never happens. Everything happens. You know, they're actually like massacres of black people by white nationalists. Those are things that happen. One went to Buffalo and killed 10 people in a supermarket. Another went into a church in South Carolina and gunned down, I believe, 9 or 10 people because they were black. There was recently a similar hate crime in Jacksonville. But no conservative says, oh, well, if there's an incident that you can point to where black people are being slaughtered for being black, that must mean that we have a racism epidemic in the United States and we have to rearrange our laws. No, they'll mock you if you say that. But where are those? Obviously, nothing like that has happened since October 7th. But where is any of this? These are completely fabricated claims. And he's right that if you, it all comes from social media, just people repeating it over and over and over. I told you I had this experience. It was driving me crazy. For months, all I heard, I kept hearing, what do you mean free speech? You don't have the right to go around chanting kill all Jews. And I would say, where did that ever happen? On what college campus were groups of people, protesters, pro-Palestinian protesters, going around chanting kill all Jews? Where did this happen? And that was what Elise Stefanik tried to imply when she was questioning the presidents of Harvard and Penn who got fired, and MIT, who he hasn't yet, was what about calls for genocide? And they were reluctant to answer because they knew that a lot of Israel supporters claimed that any criticism of Israel is a call for genocide. And that's why they were saying, well, it depends on the context, which of course it did. That's the free speech theory that you should want college presidents adopting. Now, the problem is they don't adopt that free speech posture in almost any other case. So when they did it here, they just had no credibility. That was their fault. But Elise Stefanik is somebody who is trying to be Trump's vice president. She has spent the last decade just scorning woke ideology and identity politics, and there is no greater practice of identity politics in the United States than American Jews insisting that they are a victim group, either because people don't like Israel or people don't like Jews. And I think of all the different minority groups that you might want to claim that about, American Jews are one of the most difficult to try and depict as some sort of marginalized and discriminated against and repressed minority group that can't thrive or prosper in the United States. The reason this narrative exists and is coming from so many places is precisely because American Jews, like other minority groups, like Nigerian Americans or Indian Americans, do quite well in the United States and have a lot of influence and power in various sectors. But this whole victimhood claim from the very people who claim to hate victimhood discourse has been so bizarre to watch. And well, I just showed you the first, 3 or 4 minutes or so. If you want to watch the rest of it, it continues like this in a very persuasive vein. You can just go to YouTube and search Howie Mandel, Shaffir, and anti-Semitism, and you'll immediately find it. There's about the whole podcast is, I think, 2 hours long, but this portion of the discussion is, I think, 10 minutes, 25 seconds. So you can find it. I would highly recommend it. I found it incredibly engaging because I think this is an important point to make, an interesting point to make, which is sometimes people who are immersed the most in politics, who are paid to be political commentators or analysts or whatever, who live in New York and Washington, are just constantly immersed in political discourse, often are the most incapable of seeing the truth, of seeing reality, because they're just so blinded by the discourse, controlled by political social media. Their brains are just drowned in it. And I had this experience once, and I really don't like these kind of attempts to like romanticize like working class people or people in the middle of the country. They can be just as awful as anybody else. But I remember one time, it was actually at the time when The Intercept had one of its biggest scandals that I had nothing to do with, but was blamed on me, which was when they got a hold of that story about this memo that claimed with no evidence that Russia actually interfered in the 2016 election by trying to change votes. And they, through total carelessness and unprofessional and amateur behavior, unintentionally outed the source, which was Reality Winner. And the scandal made it to the front page of the New York Times, and I was in a cafe for other just reasons in Milwaukee, just outside Milwaukee, in like a suburb of Milwaukee, just like in a diner or whatever, having lunch. And it's kind of banal for political people to talk about, oh, I was in a diner in the middle of the country, but I really was. And there was a group of, I don't know, 5 people. Obviously, like, they had like working class uniforms, like labor uniforms on. And they were, the way they were talking, there was obviously not people very politically engaged, but they would have, you know, on their phone, like whatever the top 2 or 3 stories were on the New York Times, they would see those and they would look at those. And one of the stories was about how The Intercept so poorly handled the source of their source and source protection and unintentionally outed her, but it was also about the story itself, about how the Russians were trying to influence the 2016 election. And what they were saying, they didn't really have any interest in the Intercept part of the story, but they were saying, you know, when it comes to this, all these claims about Russia, this was 2017. So obviously the whole 2016 campaign was based on this. And then we were into the Trump presidency, where the Steele dossier had flooded the media and everything was Russia and Trump and Russia and Trump. And they kind of said, look, it's so hard to know what's true when it comes to all these claims about Russia, because they're always anonymous and you never see any evidence for it, and it's impossible to know if it's true or not. And it was all, that's all they said. And I remember thinking, that is the core of all of it. But if you try to say that to some supposedly politically sophisticated person who works in that Acela corridor in New York and Washington, who gets paid to spend their time on political and social media, who knows every detail of every Russian, they would think that that's crazy, that only a Kremlin agent would say that. And it was just the most common, obvious wisdom. And oftentimes you see things more clearly when you're not immersed in these political centers, just like I think that you can practice and understand journalism better if you don't get contaminated by journalism school. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.